It was 2:43 a.m. when I first realized something was terribly wrong. I had just woken up, the kind of deep sleep that left you disoriented and unsure of where you were. But it wasn't the darkness that unsettled me. It wasn't the strange creak of the house settling or the way the wind howled against the window. It was the silence, perfect, oppressive silence. I reached out to touch the other side of the bed, expecting to find Lila curled up, as she usually was, tucked under the covers, her breathing steady. But the space next to me was cold, empty. I rubbed my eyes, groggy, and reached for my phone. The screen lit up with a dozen missed notifications, most of them from work. Then, I saw the one message from Lila, sent at 1:52 a.m. "Sorry, I got caught up with something. We'll be home soon." I frowned. It was unlike her to be out this late, especially without telling me more details. We'd always kept in touch. Even when one of us was out late, we sent a quick update, something small just to let the other person know where we were. I waited another half hour, and then another hour. No sign of her. No call, no message. The knot in my stomach started to tighten. By 4:30 a.m., I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed my jacket and went out into the cold, trying to ignore the creeping sense of dread gnawing at the back of my mind. I didn't want to admit what I was thinking, but the longer I waited, the more the thought seemed inevitable. Something was wrong. I drove to the last place she said she'd be, a small cafe she sometimes visited to clear her head. It was a 20-minute drive, but when I arrived, the place was empty. The lights were dim, the chairs stacked up, and the door locked. My heart sank. There was no reason she'd still be here, right? And why hadn't she answered her phone? I drove around for a while, getting more and more frantic. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. Her car parked at a random street corner? A broken taillight? Maybe some hint of what was going on. But there was nothing. The streets were deserted, as silent as the house I'd just left behind. That's when I saw it. It wasn't her car. It was his. A dark sedan, parked in front of a building I didn't recognize. A part of me, the rational part that wanted to think I was just being paranoid, told me to turn away. Leave it alone. But the other part of me, the part that had been whispering for months that something was off, told me I needed to know. I couldn't just ignore it. I parked a block away, my hands shaking as I got out of the car. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but I had to go. I had to see for myself. The building was an old office complex, half empty, the kind of place that had seen better days. There were no lights on except for a faint glow coming from one of the windows on the second floor. I couldn't tell exactly what was going on from the street, but I felt my pulse quicken as I approached. The closer I got, the louder the sound of my heart became. I stepped closer to the building, walking as quietly as I could. When I reached the side, I found a small alleyway that led to a back entrance. The door was cracked open, just enough for me to slip inside without being noticed. The inside of the building smelled musty, the air stale. I didn't know what I was looking for. Answers, I guess. I wanted something to make sense of all the tension that had been building in our relationship. I crept through the hallway, the silence around me deafening. Then, I heard something. A voice. Low. Familiar. Lila's voice. My stomach dropped. I moved closer, trying to make myself as invisible as possible. I reached the source of the voice, a small conference room with frosted glass windows. And that's when I saw them. Lila. But not the Lila I thought I knew. She was standing close to a man, tall, with dark hair, his back to me. They were too close. Her hand rested on his chest, and they were laughing, like they were sharing some inside joke. But it wasn't just the way they were standing. It wasn't the way they were touching. It was the look on her face. The look that I hadn't seen in months. The look that wasn't for me. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. My mind tried to piece it together, but it felt like everything I had known about her, about us, was slipping through my fingers. The betrayal was sudden. It was brutal, and it hit me harder than anything I could have imagined. She wasn't just being distant. She wasn't just having a rough time. This wasn't an innocent moment. This wasn't a friendly chat. She was with him. And the worst part? I knew him. It took a second for the realization to hit me, but when it did, the blood drained from my face. I had met him months ago, at a party, when Lila and I were still getting along. His name was Marcus, an old acquaintance from her college days. Back then, it was nothing, just some friendly banter. But now, I couldn't deny it. He was more than just an acquaintance. My heart raced as I stood there, the weight of the moment crushing me. The whispers in my mind were now screaming at me. This is it. This is real. She's cheating on you. But I didn't know what to do. Should I walk in and confront them? Should I just leave and pretend I never saw anything? Should I walk out and never come back? Before I could decide, Lila suddenly turned. She glanced at the window, as if sensing something was off. Her eyes met mine through the frosted glass, and I saw her face pale. She said something to Marcus, then quickly moved toward the door. In that instant, all I could think was, I have to leave. I can't be here when she comes out. I can't face her yet. So, I did the only thing that made sense at the time. I turned and ran. The footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, growing fainter as I sprinted towards the exit. I didn't even stop to look back. I didn't need to. I knew what I had just seen, and everything was about to change. The drive home was a blur. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to get away. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white, and my mind raced faster than my car could go. The image of Lila, her face flushed with laughter, her hand on Marcus' chest, it wouldn't leave me. It was seared into my mind like a branding iron. Each time I blinked, the scene replaying itself in full color. I could still see her eyes, the way they lit up when she looked at him, a warmth I hadn't seen in her in so long. It was suffocating. The weight of it pressed down on me, and every inch of my body was screaming, but I didn't know what to do with all this anger and confusion. When I got home, I parked the car in the driveway, but didn't get out right away. I just sat there, staring at the front door, knowing what was waiting on the other side. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but I also wanted to know the truth. What was going on? Why hadn't she told me? She had to know I'd seen her. There was no way she could pretend like nothing had happened when I walked through that door. But what was I supposed to say? Was I supposed to demand answers immediately, confront her about Marcus? Or should I just wait, let her make the first move? I don't know how long I sat there in the car, maybe minutes, maybe hours. But eventually, I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped out into the cold night air. It wasn't just the chill that made me shiver, it was the uncertainty of everything. I didn't know what was real anymore. I walked into the house, and there she was. Lila, standing in the kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. She looked up when I entered, her expression neutral, almost surprised. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, but she quickly wiped at them as if she'd just noticed. "Hey," she said, a little too cheerfully. "Hey," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I was trying to control the shaking in my hands, the flood of emotion threatening to spill over. But I couldn't stop myself. I didn't even think about it. I just blurted out, "You were with him, weren't you?" She froze, her face paling at the mention of his name. What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaky. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't bear to see the woman I loved stand there, lying to my face. "I saw you, Lila. I saw you with Marcus." Her expression shifted from confusion to panic in an instant. She took a step back, and I could see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out how to cover up her tracks. "Ethan, it's not what you think," she said, her voice high-pitched. I couldn't take it anymore. "Don't lie to me," I said, cutting her off. "I saw you, Lila. I saw you laughing with him, touching him like you used to touch me, like you still cared. Don't tell me it's nothing. I'm not stupid." Her face crumpled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she looked vulnerable. She didn't speak at first, just standing there, staring at the floor. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "Ethan, I never meant for this to happen. It just did." I felt a lump form in my throat. Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to tell her everything would be okay, that we could fix this. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt so badly, wanted to scream at her, demand that she explain everything. "What is this, Lila?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What are you doing? Why didn't you tell me?" She took a deep breath, wiping her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you. I swear. Marcus and we've been talking for a while, and it just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but I couldn't stop it." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the sting of betrayal gnawing at me. "So what? You're just going to throw everything away? Us? What we had?" She shook her head quickly. "No, Ethan. I didn't want to throw it away. But things between us, lately, it's like we've been living in two different worlds. I couldn't feel close to you anymore. I didn't know how to fix it." I felt my world begin to crumble. How had I not seen it? How had I not noticed how distant she'd become, how she'd pulled away from me little by little. I thought it was just a phase, something work-related, something I could fix. But I had been blind. The truth was in front of me the whole time. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. I could hear the steady ticking of the clock on the wall, the faint hum of the refrigerator. It felt like the whole world had stopped. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Instead, I walked out of the room. I needed space. I needed to think, to breathe. But as I turned to leave, she called after me. "Ethan, please don't leave. Please, we can talk about this. We can fix it." I didn't stop. I couldn't. The last thing I wanted to hear was her apologies, her empty promises. What we had, what we'd built together, was broken, shattered beyond repair. I went upstairs to our bedroom, the place that used to feel like a sanctuary. But now, it felt like a prison. I stood there for a moment, staring at the bed where we used to lie together, the pillows that had once been shared between us, the sheets that now felt like strangers. The tears came then, hot and fast. But I didn't cry for her. I cried for the future I thought I had, for the life I'd built with her that was nothing but a lie. I couldn't even bring myself to look at her when I left the room. I couldn't bear the sight of her anymore. But I didn't know where to go from here. What do you do when everything you thought you knew about love, about trust, is gone? How do you fix a marriage that's already broken, a relationship that was doomed from the start? I didn't have the answers. All I had was the cold emptiness that surrounded me, and the painful realization that the woman I loved had already moved on. And as much as I wanted to believe we could somehow fix this, part of me knew the truth. Some things can never be repaired. And as I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space where she used to lie, I couldn't help but wonder, how long had she been planning this? How long had she been pretending? I thought I knew her. But the truth was, I had no idea who she was anymore. And now, I had to figure out what came next. The days after that night blurred into each other. I hardly left the house, and when I did, it was just to get away from the suffocating silence that had taken over everything. Lila stayed in the guest room, leaving me alone in our once shared space. I thought I would be able to think things through, to find clarity, but all I had was more confusion. The rage that had burned so hot in the beginning started to fade, replaced by an overwhelming sense of emptiness. I didn't know if I wanted answers anymore. What good would they do? What good was it to ask why she'd betrayed me, when I already knew the answer? The truth was staring me in the face. She had moved on, and I was the one left picking up the pieces. The worst part wasn't even her betrayal. It was the lies. The way she'd let me live in a fog for months, believing everything was fine, when all along, she was getting closer to someone else. It was that slow erosion of trust that I couldn't get out of my head. Every little lie, every half-truth, felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. A week passed, and nothing changed. She tried to talk to me, tried to apologize, but it felt like I was listening to someone I didn't even know anymore. Each apology, each tear she shed, felt empty. I couldn't bring myself to believe her anymore. How could I? It was on the 8th day after the confrontation when I got a message. I wasn't expecting it, and I certainly wasn't looking for it, but there it was, on my phone, staring up at me in a text from Marcus. I had no idea how he even got my number, but I knew I had to read it. I was already too deep in this mess to ignore it. The message was simple. "I need to talk to you. It's about Lila." I don't know why I didn't block him or delete it right away. Maybe I thought there was something more I needed to hear. Maybe I wanted the final nail in the coffin, but I found myself typing out a reply. "I don't know what you think you're going to say, but whatever it is, I'm listening." He responded almost instantly. "Meet me at the park. Tomorrow, 9 p.m. Just you. No Lila." I stared at the message, conflicted. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of thinking I cared. But something inside me told me I had to. I needed to know if he was the one who was going to give me the answers I so desperately sought. The next evening, I found myself standing at the edge of a small park, the air chilly as the sun dipped below the horizon. The park was empty, save for a few scattered joggers and a couple of people walking their dogs. It felt strangely appropriate. I was about to meet the man who had unknowingly destroyed my life, and I didn't know if I was going to confront him or walk away from it all. As I waited by the benches, I saw him approaching. Marcus. He was taller than I remembered, with a confident stride, like he had all the answers, like he knew something I didn't. But the moment I saw him, I didn't feel angry anymore. It was like a cold numbness settled over me. Maybe it was the calm before the storm, but I knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same again. He stopped a few feet away from me, eyeing me carefully. "Ethan," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. He wasn't what I expected. I thought he'd be smug, maybe full of himself, but instead, he looked uncomfortable. "Thanks for coming." I nodded, but didn't speak. I wasn't sure what I wanted to hear, and I didn't trust myself to speak just yet. "Listen," he continued, glancing around as if making sure no one was watching. "This is hard for me, too. But you need to know the truth. Lila, she didn't just fall into this. She's not some victim in this situation. She's not the person you think she is." I could feel my pulse quicken. My first instinct was to shut him down, to tell him to stop talking. But there was a part of me that needed to hear it, needed to know just how far gone everything was. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice quiet but sharp. He sighed deeply, shifting on his feet. "I don't know how to say this, man. But when Lila and I first started talking, it was innocent. She wasn't looking for an affair, or so she said. But as time went on, I saw a side of her that you didn't. She was unhappy, Ethan. I could see it in her. She didn't want to leave you, but at the same time, she couldn't keep pretending. The thing is, I don't think she even realized how much of it was her fault. She thought she was doing the right thing by keeping you in the dark." I didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't new information, but hearing it from him made it feel worse. The way he spoke about Lila, like he understood her in ways I never could, it hit me harder than I expected. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally managed to ask. Marcus looked down, his expression a mix of guilt and frustration. "Because I'm not the only one she lied to. I think you deserve to know the truth, Ethan. You deserve to know why it happened." He paused, then added, "I don't think she's coming back to you. Not the way you want her to. She's already checked out. And you need to face that." The finality in his words struck me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "You think I don't know that?" I spat, my voice cracking. I took a step back, suddenly feeling lightheaded. "I know she's gone, Marcus. But hearing you say it, hearing you tell me the truth, it makes it worse." He didn't argue. He just nodded, like he knew, like he understood the weight of the moment. "I'm sorry, Ethan," he said softly. "I never wanted this to happen. But you deserve better than being stuck in a relationship where no one's honest with each other. You need to move on, man." His words echoed in my head, repeating over and over like a mantra. You need to move on. How was I supposed to do that? How was I supposed to let go of everything I'd built, everything I thought I had with her? I didn't answer him right away. I just stood there, looking at him, feeling like I was caught in a storm. Nothing in my life seemed real anymore. And the worst part? I couldn't tell if I was ready to let go, or if I still hoped, somewhere deep inside, that things could go back to the way they were. But deep down, I knew the truth. Lila had already made her choice, and I was just too afraid to admit it. That night, after Marcus left, I drove around for hours, trying to shake off the weight of everything. But it didn't work. The truth was too heavy, and I was starting to realize something I'd been avoiding for too long. No matter how much I wanted things to go back to normal, they never would. And I didn't know how to move forward. But I had to try. The next few days were a blur. I spent most of my time wandering around the house, unsure of what to do with myself. The place that once felt like a home now felt like a cage, the walls closing in on me with every passing hour. Every time I thought about Lila, about the way things had ended so suddenly, I felt like I was suffocating. She wasn't coming back. I knew that now. She wasn't going to crawl back to me with apologies or promises. And I couldn't keep holding on to something that was already slipping through my fingers. I decided to get out. Not just the house, but the town. The place we'd built our life together had become a constant reminder of the lies, of the time I'd wasted. Maybe a change of scenery would help. So, I booked a last-minute trip, a small getaway, a chance to clear my head. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friends. I needed to be alone, away from everything and everyone. I needed to figure out what I was supposed to do next. The day I left, I packed my bags in a daze. There was no excitement, no anticipation, just the need to be far away, to get away from the haunting thoughts that kept cycling through my mind. I left the house and didn't look back. The flight was long. I don't even remember half of it, just staring out of the window at the endless expanse of sky. When I arrived at the small town I'd booked my trip to, everything felt quieter, more peaceful. The air was different, fresher. I rented a small cabin by the lake, A place far enough from civilization that I could spend days without seeing a single soul. It was perfect for what I needed, solitude. I spent the first day in silence. I walked by the water, sat on the porch of the cabin, and tried to take in the stillness of everything. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the thoughts of Lila. They lingered in the back of my mind, like an itch I couldn't scratch. I didn't know what I was trying to achieve by being here. Some part of me thought I could find clarity in this isolation. But all I found was more confusion. It wasn't until the second day that something unexpected happened. I was sitting outside, reading a book I'd picked up in the small bookstore in town, when I heard a car pull up. My first thought was that I was imagining things, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But then I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. I looked up, and there, standing at the edge of the porch, was someone I never expected to see again. It was Lila. I froze. My heart skipped a beat, and my chest tightened. She looked different. Her face was pale, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. She was wearing the same coat she'd worn the night she left, and there was a look in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. A mixture of regret and desperation. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what to say. The emotions I had kept bottled up for so long suddenly erupted, but I kept them inside. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing how much this was tearing me apart. "What are you doing here, Lila?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. She hesitated before sitting down beside me on the porch. She didn't look at me, instead staring out at the water. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Ethan. I know what I've done. But I couldn't let you go without at least trying to explain. Without giving you the truth." I didn't respond. Part of me wanted to hear her out, to let her speak, to hear her explanation. But the other part of me, the part that had been betrayed, wanted to push her away. I wasn't ready to listen. Not yet. She sighed, clearly frustrated by my silence. "I'm sorry for everything, Ethan. For all the lies, for the way I hurt you. I don't know when things started falling apart, but I know I was too scared to face it. I kept pretending that everything was okay, that you wouldn't notice. But you did, and I hated myself for it. And when Marcus—" "Stop," I said, my voice rising without meaning to. "Don't talk about him. Don't tell me about your feelings for him. You don't get to drag him into this. You were with me. You lied to me." She flinched, but didn't back down. "I know, and I can't take that back. I can't undo the hurt I caused. But I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just need you to know the truth, because I've been running from it for so long. I've been running from us. From you. And I'm sorry." I looked at her, my chest tightening. There were so many things I wanted to say, so many questions I wanted to ask, but none of them felt right. The more she spoke, the more I realized I didn't even recognize the woman sitting beside me. She was a stranger now, a stranger I had once loved. "Why now?" I asked, my voice quiet. "Why come here after everything? After you've already made your choice?" She finally turned to look at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Because I can't live with myself anymore, Ethan. I can't pretend that I don't care. I do. I always have. But I was too afraid to admit it. Too afraid to admit that I was running away from something real. From us." I shook my head. "But you did. You ran. And now, it's too late." For a moment, we just sat there in silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air between us. I wanted to scream, to tell her everything I had been feeling, but nothing came out. The truth was, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was numb. Completely numb. "I don't know what I want anymore," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't know if there's anything left to salvage." She nodded slowly, the tears falling freely now. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know the truth." The truth. It was all I ever wanted. But now that I had it, it didn't feel like enough. It didn't change anything. It didn't take away the pain or the betrayal. It didn't undo the months of lies, the promises broken, the love that had been shattered. "Thank you for coming here," I said, standing up. "But it's too late. I need to let go, and you need to go back to your life." She looked at me, pain in her eyes, and then slowly, without a word, she stood up and walked away. I watched her go, feeling nothing. Not relief, not anger, just emptiness. As she disappeared into the distance, I realized something. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was gone. And in her place was someone who didn't belong in my life anymore. I turned back to the lake. watching the ripples spread across the water, and wondered if I could ever find peace again. The days after Lila left were a blur, but I could feel something changing inside me. The cabin by the lake became my refuge, a place where I could be alone with my thoughts, where the echoes of my past relationship didn't feel as loud. But the silence of the cabin soon became its own kind of prison. I spent my mornings staring out at the water, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of pink and orange, and my evenings walking along the shore, trying to outrun the relentless thoughts of everything that had happened. It had been 3 days since Lila left, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running away from something. I told myself I was here to heal, to find clarity, but each passing hour only made the questions in my mind grow louder. What now? Where did I go from here? Could I even go back to the life I once had? On the 4th day, I decided to take a trip into town. I didn't need anything, but I was restless. I needed to be around people again, even if I didn't know them. Maybe it would remind me that I wasn't the only one going through something difficult. Maybe it would help me start moving forward. I walked down the quiet streets of the small town, trying to take in the charm of it all. The old brick buildings, the local shops, the sound of children playing in the distance. For a moment, it almost felt like a normal day, like nothing had happened. But then I saw her. It wasn't Lila, but it might as well have been. She looked so familiar, walking across the street with a sense of purpose, her head held high. But there was something about the way she walked that hit me like a wave. She was beautiful in the same effortless way Lila had been when I first met her, her blonde hair flowing in the wind, her eyes scanning the street as if she was looking for something. My heart skipped a beat as I took a few steps closer, half expecting it to be Lila in some new version of herself, like she had magically come back to me. But as I reached the sidewalk, the woman turned and looked straight at me. It wasn't Lila. It was someone else. For a moment, I was caught in the gaze of a stranger. She looked me up and down, then smiled politely, like she had no idea what was happening in my head. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind to snap out of the moment. "Hey," I said, feeling awkward, unsure of why I'd even approached her. "Do you know where the cafe is around here?" The woman nodded, her smile still lingering. "Sure, just a few blocks down the street." She gave me directions, and then, before I could say anything else, she was gone. But as she walked away, I felt something stir within me. It was as if I'd caught a glimpse of something I'd lost, something I'd forgotten existed. It wasn't just the woman herself. It was the fact that for a split second, I felt like I could still find someone else. Maybe not in the way I had loved Lila, but something new, something different. I walked to the cafe, the weight of my past still hanging over me, but the thought of the stranger lingered in my mind. The cafe was quiet, a small, cozy place that smelled of coffee and fresh pastries. I ordered a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and stared out at the world outside. It was a world that felt so far removed from my own. The people walking by, laughing, chatting, living their lives, none of them knew what I had just gone through. None of them knew how much I was struggling to keep my footing in a life that had been shattered. But as I sat there, something began to shift inside me. Maybe I wasn't as far gone as I thought. Maybe I could still find my way out of this, even if it felt impossible. Maybe, just maybe, this stranger, this brief interaction, was the first spark of something new. I didn't know how long I stayed in the cafe, but I knew that when I left, I wasn't the same person who had walked in. I wasn't ready to jump into something new, not by any means, but I had caught a glimpse of the possibility of moving on. That evening, back at the cabin, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. The confrontation with Lila, the pain, the realization that I had been living in a lie, and the strange encounter with the woman in town. It all swirled together in my mind, each piece of the puzzle starting to fall into place. But the most important thing I realized in that moment was that I wasn't done yet. I wasn't done with life, with love, or with my future. Yes, Lila had betrayed me. Yes, everything I had built with her had come crashing down. But that wasn't the end of my story. I wasn't going to let it be. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever fully trust again, or if I would find someone who made me feel the way I had with Lila. But what I did know was that I had to let go of the past. I had to stop letting it control me. I had to take control of my own life again. The next morning, I woke up early and made a decision. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but I had to take that first step. I would start rebuilding my life, piece by piece. I would stop hiding from my pain and start moving forward. I wasn't going to let what happened with Lila define me. I packed up my things and left the cabin. I didn't look back. As I drove back home, I realized something. I wasn't running away anymore. I wasn't running from my past, or from the hurt, or from the memories that kept trying to pull me under. I was running towards something new, something I hadn't been able to see until now. And maybe, just maybe, it was the first step toward a new chapter. I wasn't sure what that would look like, but I was ready to find out. The drive back home was the longest I had ever endured. The roads were empty, the landscape blurring around me, as if the world itself was a passing memory I could barely hold on to. The cabin by the lake felt like a distant dream now, a place where I thought I could escape everything. But it was clear to me that running away didn't solve anything. No matter how far I went, no matter how much I distanced myself from the past, it was always going to be there, lurking in the corners of my mind. But as I approached my home, the familiar neighborhood coming into view, I didn't feel fear or regret. I felt strangely empowered, like a decision had been made, and the burden that had been crushing me for so long was finally beginning to lift. The house wasn't a prison anymore. It was just a house, a place where I would continue my life, but not define it. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a while, watching the windows of the house. I could see the faint glow of a light in the living room. Lila's presence still lingered in the air, even though she was no longer here. Her scent, her laughter, the way she would leave her shoes by the door, it was all part of this life I had once cherished. But that life was gone. It was time for something new. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. There was no point in avoiding it. I had to face everything head on, even if it was just to clear the space for what came next. The door creaked as I opened it, the house feeling even emptier than I remembered. The walls seemed to echo with memories, some good, some painful. I didn't even turn on the lights. I didn't want to. The dark felt like a reminder that I was no longer part of the life I had been living. I wanted that to sink in completely, to embrace the fact that everything was different now. I walked through the room slowly, touching nothing, just letting the weight of everything wash over me. When I reached our bedroom, I stopped. I wasn't ready to go in. I could still see the bed where we had once slept side by side. It felt like a different world, a different me. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, not fully. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep holding on to this version of myself that had been tied to her. I grabbed a bag from the closet, tossed in a few clothes, and started packing. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't want to stay here. I couldn't keep sleeping in that bed, pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. The house, the memories, the ghosts of a past life, they all needed to be left behind. It wasn't about escaping. It was about shedding the skin of who I had been, so I could find out who I was meant to be now. The person I'd been with Lila didn't exist anymore. And if I stayed here, I would never be able to find out who I could be without her. I spent hours packing, clearing out the things that felt too personal. I found an old photograph of us, taken on our first vacation together. We were both laughing, our faces lit up with joy, and for a moment, I felt the sting of what I had lost. But then I remembered something I'd realized at the cabin. I wasn't just losing Lila. I was losing the version of myself I had been in that relationship, and that wasn't something I was willing to hold on to any longer. I had to move forward. The next morning, I didn't wait. I left. No goodbyes, no more lingering over the past. It was time to start fresh, even if I didn't know what that meant. I drove out of town with no clear destination, no clear plan. But for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel trapped. I felt free. I spent the next few weeks bouncing between small towns, staying in cheap motels, and trying to figure out what to do with my life. There were moments of peace, moments where I felt like I could finally breathe again. And then there were moments where the loneliness hit me harder than I ever expected. I still missed Lila. I still wish things hadn't ended the way they did. But I didn't let myself go back to that place. I knew better now. One evening, after I'd spent the day hiking in a forest outside a small mountain town, I found myself at a bar. It was one of those dark, quiet places where people came to drink away their problems without anyone asking questions. I walked in and sat at the bar, ordering a drink without much thought. As I stared at the amber liquid in my glass, I couldn't help but wonder how much of this was me running away from the pain, and how much of it was me trying to understand what had gone wrong. I wasn't sure which one was worse, honestly. But as the night wore on, something unexpected happened. A woman sat next to me at the bar. She was older, maybe in her early 40s, with short dark hair and a sharp, confident look in her eyes. She wasn't the kind of woman I usually noticed, but there was something about her that made me look twice. Maybe it was her energy, the way she didn't seem afraid to take up space. She caught my eye, and instead of looking away, she smiled. "You're a long way from home," she said, her voice low but clear. "What brings you out here?" I hesitated. I wasn't ready to talk about the mess I had left behind, but there was something about her that made me feel like I could tell her anything. So I did. "I guess I'm just trying to find myself," I said. "Or at least figure out who I am now." She nodded, like she understood. "Sometimes you have to get lost before you can find your way back." I didn't know why, but her words stuck with me. Maybe it was the way she said it, or maybe it was because they mirrored what I had been thinking for so long. I had to get lost, to go through this pain, before I could figure out who I was supposed to be. We talked for hours. It wasn't deep, but it felt like a weight was lifted. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was drowning in the aftermath of Lila's betrayal. For a few hours, I felt like I was just a person again. Not a man defined by heartbreak, not a man trapped in the past, but just someone figuring it all out. As I left the bar that night, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't sure what was next. I didn't know if I would ever be the person I used to be, or if I even wanted to be. But I knew one thing for sure. I was on my way to something different. And that was enough for now. The road ahead was still uncertain, but at least I knew I wasn't walking it alone anymore. The weeks that followed felt like a blur, but not in the way I had imagined. I had expected the emptiness to consume me, to swallow me whole until I couldn't see the light anymore. But it didn't. Somehow, I found a strange kind of peace in the chaos. I had started meeting people along the way, strangers who weren't burdened with the weight of my past, who didn't know the man I had been. They only saw the version of me that existed now, and that version of me was starting to feel a little less broken. There was something freeing about being anonymous, about not having to explain who I was or what had happened to me. No one asked me about my ex-wife. No one asked about my failed marriage. They just accepted me as I was, someone new. Someone who could still laugh, still enjoy a drink, still make new memories. For the first time in months, I could forget what had happened and live in the present. But even as I allowed myself to enjoy the freedom of moving through life without the shadow of Lila hanging over me, there was still a gnawing feeling in the back of my mind, like a small voice whispering that something wasn't quite right. It was during one of these quiet moments of reflection that I realized how much I had been avoiding the truth. The truth about why I had left so suddenly. The truth about why I hadn't gone back home to face the inevitable. It wasn't just about Lila anymore. It was about me, about the person I had become after everything fell apart. I had spent so long trying to rebuild myself, trying to figure out who I was without her, that I had forgotten who I was before her. I wasn't just a husband. I wasn't just someone defined by his relationships. I was someone who had dreams, who had aspirations, who had a life to live outside of the context of anyone else's expectations. That realization hit me one evening as I was sitting in a small cafe in a town I had stumbled into. The coffee was warm, the people around me were lost in their own worlds, and the soft hum of background conversation was almost soothing. I had spent the last few months hopping from place to place, trying to outrun my past, but now I realized it wasn't about running at all. It was about accepting what had happened, facing it head-on, and moving forward with the strength I didn't know I had. It was in that moment of quiet contemplation that my phone buzzed on the table. I had been avoiding calls for weeks, letting the voicemail fill up with messages I didn't want to hear. But something told me I had to answer this one. I didn't know why, but when I looked at the screen and saw the name that flashed before my eyes, Lila, it felt like a jolt of electricity shot through my body. I stared at the name for a few seconds, unsure whether to answer or not. I had come so far. I had left her behind. What could she possibly want now? But I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. Ethan. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. The kind of voice you use when you know you've done something wrong, when you're not sure how to ask for forgiveness. I don't know how to start this conversation, but I need to talk to you. I felt my stomach tighten, but I couldn't bring myself to hang up. I couldn't pretend like I didn't care. She had been a part of my life for so long, and no matter how much I wanted to forget her, the connection between us wasn't something that could just vanish. Go ahead, I said, my voice flat, trying to keep it together. I've been thinking a lot, she continued, about everything. About us. And I know I don't deserve to ask this, but I need you to hear me out. I was silent for a moment, weighing the options in my mind. Did I really need to hear what she had to say? Was it worth reopening old wounds for something that might not even matter anymore? But then I thought about everything I had been through. All the anger, the confusion, the pain, and the fact that I hadn't let myself truly face it. I had been running, hiding behind distractions, but I had never confronted her. Not really. I'm listening, I finally said, my voice quieter now, almost as if I was preparing myself for something painful. I don't expect you to forgive me, she began, her voice trembling slightly, but I need to explain. I was selfish, Ethan. I was so consumed with my own unhappiness that I couldn't see how much I was hurting you. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to fix us. And I was scared. Scared of losing myself. I didn't realize how much I was pushing you away until it was too late. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but it didn't erase the fact that everything she said now was too little, too late. The damage had already been done. I know, I said softly, almost to myself. I know all that, Lila. But it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change how you left me. How you chose someone else over the life we had. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted that. I know, I replied, feeling the weight of her words settle into my chest. But even with the understanding, the part of me that had been hurt still couldn't let go. I wasn't sure I could. Ethan, she said after a moment, her voice shaky, I don't want to fix it. I don't want to ask for anything more from you. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I wanted you to hear that from me. The sincerity in her voice was undeniable. But even as I listened to her apology, I realized something that I had been trying to deny for so long. I was still angry. Not just at her, but at myself, for letting her in so deeply, for trusting her when I should have known better. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. And maybe not ever. I hear you, I said, my voice steady. And I'm glad you called. But I don't think I can give you what you want, Lila. Not anymore. I need to move on. I have to. I understand, she replied, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I hope you find peace, Ethan. I hope you find happiness again. And with that, she hung up. For a moment, I sat there, staring at the screen, unsure of what to feel. Relief? Closure? Or was it just the final push I needed to move forward? I took a deep breath, set the phone down, and looked out the window. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm glow over the city. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this define me anymore. Lila was a part of my past, and while the pain would always be there, it didn't have to control me. I could move forward, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally ready to. The road ahead was still uncertain, but now I was walking it with my head held high. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had the strength to face whatever came next. The days after that phone call passed in a blur of clarity. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest, not because everything was suddenly fixed, but because I had finally accepted what had happened. I had let go of the anger that had consumed me for so long. I had forgiven not just Lila, but myself. I had to, because I realized something important. I couldn't let the past define me any longer. I had a future ahead of me, one I had to start building from the ground up. I didn't know exactly how to go about it, but that was okay. I didn't need all the answers right away. I just needed to keep moving forward, even if that meant taking one small step at a time. I started by doing things I hadn't done in years, things that made me feel alive again. I went for long runs in the mornings, letting the wind rush through my hair as I took in the sights and sounds of the world around me. I spent time with friends, people who didn't know the old version of me, and it felt refreshing to be around people who were there simply for who I was in that moment. I also started working on my career, something I had neglected in the haze of my relationship with Lila. I had always loved design, but I had put it on the back burner for too long. So, I enrolled in a few online courses, picked up some new skills, and before I knew it, I was applying for freelance gigs again, feeling that sense of purpose return to my life. Slowly, the pieces of my old self started to come back together, and I realized I was capable of so much more than I had ever given myself credit for. One day, as I was walking through the city, I ran into someone who made me realize just how much I had changed. It wasn't anyone I knew personally, but a woman I had met briefly a while ago at a local art show. Her name was Emily, and we'd exchanged a few words about the pieces we'd seen that day, but that was it. I didn't expect anything more. But when we saw each other on the street, she smiled warmly. "Ethan, right?" she asked, stopping me. "I remember you from that art show. How's everything going?" I was taken aback for a moment, but then I smiled. "It's going well, actually. Things are looking up." I didn't realize how much I meant it until I said it out loud. "Good to hear," she said, and we chatted briefly about life, art, and where we were both headed. It wasn't anything significant, but it felt like a spark, something fresh, something new, and it reminded me that life was full of possibilities. Before we parted ways, she mentioned that she was going to another art event the following weekend and asked if I'd like to join. Normally, I would have hesitated, unsure of what to say, but this time I didn't. I said yes. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a step, a small one, but a step in the right direction. A step toward embracing the future, to opening myself up to new experiences without fear of what had happened in the past. That weekend, I went to the event. It wasn't about making a big change or finding someone new. It was about learning to enjoy life again, without the weight of the past holding me back. I spent the evening talking to people, laughing, even letting myself feel something close to happiness again. And when I left that night, there was no lingering sadness or regret. I realized that the end of my marriage with Lila wasn't the end of me. It was just a chapter, one that I had learned from, one that had shaped me into the person I was becoming. And that person, well, I was proud of him. I had come through the storm, and while the scars were still there, they no longer defined me. They were part of my story, not the whole of it. As I drove home that night, the city lights twinkling around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. True peace. The kind that comes when you finally make your way out of the darkness and step into the light, when you stop running from your past and start walking toward your future. It wasn't going to be perfect, and there were still days where the past would creep up, but I was no longer afraid of it. I had learned that I was capable of so much more than I had ever realized. And maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who would love the new version of me. But for now, I was enough. The road ahead was wide open, full of possibility, and I was ready to walk it. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that everything would be okay.